Man is left in shock after overhearing his fiancée tell a friend, "I'll take everything from him and ruin him, just like he did to my mum." Richard was a calm man, with a soft voice, known for always being willing to help those in need. His life was simple, but solid. He was in his 40s and had built a strong foundation through his work as a civil engineer. He was respected, reliable, and although he had achieved financial stability, he never flaunted it. He lived alone in a spacious, quiet house where the voids left by past relationships seemed to be part of the decor. He had been in a few relationships, but none had lasted. They had all been shallow, fleeting, as if those who got close to him only saw his stability, not his essence. Over time, he grew accustomed to it. Solitude became routine, and he focused on his work, his calm and predictable habits. It was during a popular event that Barbara appeared. Young, beautiful, and sweet, she was nearly 20 years younger than him. Richard never would have made a move. The age difference and their different interests were too obvious, but she was the one who approached him. Amid the lights and music of the party, she introduced herself with a shy smile and soft words. He was enchanted. Barbara seemed calm and captivating in a way that caught him off guard. That night marked the beginning of something that grew quickly. They started seeing each other often, and the relationship soon became serious. She was polite, affectionate, present. To Richard, she seemed perfect. The only thing that bothered him was her silence about her family. Whenever he asked, Barbara only said that her parents had passed away and that she had no siblings or close relatives. He never pressed her further. He believed her. In no time, they were living together. Their cohabitation was easy, stable. A few years later, Richard decided to propose. He was in love and wanted to live this chance. Even though from time to time he felt that something unresolved lingered behind her silences, he chose to move forward. That day, Richard came home earlier than usual. He had finished his workday ahead of time and decided to take advantage of the unexpected free time to spend with Barbara. As he drove through the calm streets, he thought about preparing something simple for them, perhaps a coffee or a walk together. He felt a rare lightness in his chest, something that had become more common since she had entered his life. But when he opened the door to his house, he noticed something unusual. The living room light was on, even though it was still daylight. And there were voices. He walked slowly to the beginning of the hallway and soon recognized the female voices coming from the living room. One was Barbara's, clear, high-pitched, but different. The other was Isabella's, the friend who was always present during their afternoons off and outings. Still unnoticed, he thought of just entering and announcing his arrival, but before he could take a step into the living room, he heard something. His name. It was mentioned in a low tone, almost a whisper. That whisper paralyzed him. It was instinctive. Richard froze there, against the cold wall of the hallway, listening attentively. A wave of discomfort immediately washed over him, as if something inside him already knew that what was coming would not be good. His heart began to race. The next words cut through the air like a sharp blade. "I'm tired of pretending I like the life I lead with him," Barbara said, with a tone Richard had never heard in her voice. It sounded bitter, impatient, poisoned. "What do you mean, Barbara?" Isabella said, confused. "He's a fool, too naive. He lives in this perfect world thinking he's found the love of his life. Little does he know I can't stand smiling at him every day," Barbara said. "Just a little longer and I'll take everything, and leave him in the same ruin he left my mother in." Richard felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. His breath caught. Ruin? Take everything? My mother? This didn't make sense. He felt his stomach sink. It was as though the walls were closing in around him. Still motionless, he tried to process it, but the words kept coming, sharp as scalpels. "Are you serious? Are you really doing this to him?" Isabella said, her voice now lower, almost whispering, as though she was beginning to grasp the gravity of what she was hearing. What do you think? Do you think I'm just going to go on with my life without making him pay for what he did to my mother? He destroyed her. He ruined everything she was. And now I'm returning the favor, in silence, like he did. But my silence has an end date, Barbara said. Richard trembled. Cold sweat ran down his back. His face, once calm, was now frozen in an expression between shock and fury. What is she saying? He thought. What mother? What story is this? Nothing made sense. The Barbara he knew, or thought he knew, was on the other side of that wall, pouring words full of hate, contempt, cruelty. Everything he had believed in, everything he had built, seemed to crumble inside him in seconds. But he seems so, I don't know, good. He treats you well. You seem happy, Isabella said, hesitant. Happy with him, with that quiet house, with his old-fashioned ways. I have to force myself every day not to explode. Smile, pretend affection, pretend interest. It's disgusting but necessary, Barbara said with an audible smile in her voice. The plan is working. He trusts me. He's going to marry me. And then, my friend, then I'll destroy him. Richard couldn't take it anymore. Something inside him broke completely. That kind of coldness, that meticulously constructed falsehood over the years, was too much. Every word still echoed like poison inside him. There was no way to wait any longer. Indignation overcame shock. He entered the room. Both women's eyes turned to him immediately. Isabella put her hand to her mouth and went pale. Barbara froze, her face locked in an expression between shock and fury. Richard stood firm, his eyes fixed on her. "Leave, Isabella," Richard said, in a deep voice, not raising his tone but carrying weight. "Richard, Isabella tried to speak, but he cut her off. "Now, it's just her and me." Isabella said nothing more. She grabbed her bag hurriedly, averted her gaze from both of them, and left, almost running, leaving a heavy silence behind. Barbara stood still. Her face hardened, her hands clenched. He looked at her like he was seeing a stranger for the first time, a dangerous stranger. "So this is it?" Richard said, his voice thick. "Was it all a plan?" She kept her eyes fixed on him. The silence, once her mask of serenity, was now a barrier of anger. "You heard? Don't pretend you didn't understand," Barbara said cold. "I understand, yes. I understand that you spent years by my side deceiving me, that every gesture of yours was calculated, that you look at me and see only a target. I'm the prize, right? The punishment," Richard said, each word carrying the weight of the pain growing in his chest. "You ask me like you don't know. Like you're innocent," Barbara said, her eyes shining with hate. "You destroyed my mother, Deborah. Or have you forgotten her too?" Richard took a half-step back, confused. The name hit him like a punch. "Deborah?" he said, surprised. "You're Deborah's daughter." "Yes, and everything she became or didn't become is your fault," Barbara said. "You came into her life, filled her with promises, with illusions. You convinced her to leave everything behind, her job, her independence. You said you'd work together, that it was just the beginning of a life together. She believed you, gave you everything, love, trust, money, energy. And you disappeared. When you didn't need her anymore, you turned your back and took even the little she had left." Richard said nothing. He was motionless. The revelation hit like a bomb. Deborah. That story, buried so many years ago, was now coming back through the words of a daughter he hadn't even known existed. "Do you want to know why I got close? Why I was sweet, affectionate, dedicated? Because that's what you wanted. I learned to play the part, learned to be the kind of woman you'd want by your side. And now, when you thought you had won in life, that you had finally found the so-called perfect woman, now "You're going to fall. You're going to lose everything," Barbara said, her voice shaking with anger. Richard still couldn't react. He just stared at her, as if trying to decipher a nightmare. "She told me everything," Barbara said, her voice trembling. "After my father died, I went to live with her. And she was just pain. Everything that was left of the woman she once was pain. She told me how you promised marriage, how you used the project to take everything she had, how you lied, how you left, taking even the little money that remained. She never recovered, Richard. Never. Fell into a depression so deep that time couldn't heal it. And then came the sickness. And death. And I grew up with all of that burning inside me." Richard took a step forward but stopped, his eyes still fixed on her, full of disbelief. "You hate me for something they told you, something you lived through your mother's pain," he said, his voice low. "No, I hate you because you killed my mother while she was still alive. And now it's your turn," Barbara said. The silence between them remained thick, as if the air was too heavy to breathe. Richard stood still, looking at Barbara as if he was still trying to understand how any of this could be real. The anger had given way to a deep sadness, hard to name. When he finally took a deep breath, it was as though he was lifting the weight of a decade off his shoulders. His eyes were misty, but his voice came firm, controlled, marked by an old pain that now needed space. "This isn't true," Richard said in a low voice. "That's not how it happened." Barbara squinted, as if what he said was an insult. "Are you going to deny everything now? Try to erase what she lived with pretty words?" "I'm not trying to erase anything. I'm just saying that what you heard isn't what actually happened. Yes, I had a serious relationship with your mother." "With Deborah," Richard said, stepping forward one more step but keeping his distance. "It was real. We weren't just together as a couple. We worked together too. I had a project I was trying to start and she got involved. She helped me, really. It wasn't a facade. It was real partnership. We dreamed together." "So you admit she gave up everything for you?" Barbara said, her eyes filled with fury. "She gave you everything she had. She made choices, and I did too. I never asked her to give up anything. Never demanded sacrifices," Richard said. "I made plans with her. I loved her. I trusted her, and I believed she trusted me." Barbara laughed dryly. "And then you disappeared, took everything, and left her in pieces." "It wasn't like that," Richard said now more firmly. "Things changed one afternoon, in a house where I got home early from work. I was tired, wanted to surprise her. I walked in and found her with another man, on the couch, kissing. There was no doubt what was happening." Barbara opened her mouth but said nothing. There was something in her gaze that for the first time seemed less certain. "I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell. I didn't argue," Richard said, his gaze lost somewhere in the past. "I just looked. She saw me. I left, without a word. There was nothing more to say. The pain was so great that I couldn't even feel anger." "You could have come back. You could have tried to talk," Barbara said, hesitating. "You don't know what it's like to see someone you love cheating on you in your own home." "I froze. I stayed silent for days. But when I could breathe again, I decided to end everything as cleanly as possible. I went back, grabbed my papers, my things, and left her a sum of money that corresponded to what she had invested in the project. I did the math. I could have disappeared with everything, but I didn't. I left her what was fair," Richard said, each word coming out with effort. "And I left forever. Never had contact again. I didn't know she had a daughter. I never knew about you." Barbara, now with her arms crossed, breathed heavily. Her gaze no longer carried only fury. There was confusion there, a trace of doubt. "She said you took everything, that you left her with nothing," Barbara said, her voice less firm. "She built a convenient version. I understand her pain. Betrayal isn't one-sided. We break inside and sometimes need someone to blame. But I never stole, never lied. I just left," Richard said. And if I had known she had a daughter, if I had known someone was inheriting this pain, maybe I would have tried to talk. But for me, that was a wound buried, an old scar. You're trying to clean your conscience, Barbara said, but without conviction. You're putting everything on the back of a woman who's not here to defend herself. I'm telling you what I lived, and you're condemning me without hearing both sides, Richard said more firmly. You got close to me with a plan for revenge based on an incomplete story. Barbara didn't answer immediately. The tension in the air seemed to have changed. There were no more shouts, but there was no relief either. It was an impasse. There's someone who can confirm what I'm saying, Richard said after a brief silence. Your mother's sister, Emma. Barbara looked at him surprised. You know her? She asked. Yes. After everything ended between me and Deborah, I went to your aunt's house. I brought some things of your mother's that I had. I spoke with her. I told her everything. She knows the truth, Richard said. Barbara furrowed her brow. My mother always told me to stay away from Emma, that she was jealous, manipulative, that she wasn't good. I never understood why. I just obeyed. Richard took a deep breath. Maybe she didn't want you to know what really happened. Barbara fell silent. The doubt was growing, visible. The certainty she had spoken with moments earlier seemed eroded. Do you know where she lives? Richard asked. I do, Barbara said after a few seconds. She lives in a secluded neighborhood, near a terminal. I only went once when I was a child. Let's go, today. Now, Richard said. Barbara hesitated. What if she's lying? Then you listen, compare, and decide based on more than one version, Richard said. You deserve to know the truth, and so do I. Barbara lowered her gaze. She was thinking. She was tense, but something inside her began to give. Okay, she whispered. Let's go. That night, they left in silence. The trip was short but heavy. Barbara barely looked at him. Richard didn't speak either. Each of them lost in their memories, doubts and wounds. When they arrived, they knocked on the door of the modest house with walls faded by time. Emma took a few seconds but answered. Upon seeing Richard, her eyes widened in surprise. Then, when she saw Barbara beside him, it took a moment for her to process. Barbara, Emma said. My God, what's going on? We need to talk. It's serious, Richard said. Emma looked at them both, and after a moment of silence, she opened the door wider. Come in. The room was small, with old furniture. Emma sat calmly, her gaze divided between discomfort and curiosity. Why did you bring her here? Emma asked, looking at Richard. She needs to know the truth, Richard said. And you're the only one who can confirm it. Emma then looked at Barbara, her face softened, as if time had stopped for a moment. You've grown, she said, almost in a whisper. Your mother didn't want me to get close to you. She said I was a bad influence, that I didn't know how to respect her boundaries. Barbara stood, arms crossed, still suspicious. And weren't you? She asked. Emma sighed. No, I just couldn't swallow the lies she told herself, and then told you. So tell me, what really happened? Barbara said directly. Emma adjusted in her armchair and looked into her niece's eyes. Your mother fell in love with Richard. That's true. It was an intense love, real, even beautiful at first. She gave up a lot for him, but it was her choice. No one forced her. She was a dreamer, impulsive. When things didn't go the way she wanted, she got frustrated. When he ended it, she fell apart. But it wasn't him who broke her. It was herself, for not being able to deal with reality. Barbara pressed her lips together. But she said he took the money, that he left her with nothing. No, dear, Emma said sadly. I remember well. Days after it ended, he came here. He brought a box with her papers, some clothes. He was sad, worn out. He told me everything, the betrayal, the end. He said he left her the fair share of the money, and I believe him, because your mother admitted it later. She tried to deny it at first, but when I insisted, she admitted. She said she'd tell you one day, but deep down, she never had the courage. Barbara swallowed hard. And why didn't she ever tell me the truth? Because she was ashamed, Emma said. Because it was easier to paint a villain than to face her own mistakes, and because she knew you loved her too much to forgive her if you found out everything. Those words seemed to echo inside Barbara like thunder. She stayed silent, her eyes full of tears, but her face hard. "And you promised not to tell me," she said, almost accusingly. She begged me. She said if I told you, she would cut any contact. I respected that, and I regretted it many times. Barbara remained seated, her eyes fixed on the floor as if she were seeing through the floorboards. Every word Emma said seemed to tear away a piece of the certainties she had carried since childhood. The silence between them now was different. It wasn't tense. It was the emptiness that comes when something very heavy breaks inside. Richard, on the other side of the room, observed in silence. There was no more anger in his gaze, just a sad tiredness. His pain now mixed with hers, as if both had lost something they never really understood. "I don't know what to do with this," Barbara finally said, her voice hoarse. "It's like everything inside of me is wrong." Emma approached slowly and sat beside her but didn't touch her. "You grew up hearing only one version. You never had a chance to question. I saw how your mother suffered, but she couldn't face herself honestly either. She put on Richard the pain she herself fed." "But I spent my whole life preparing to get justice," Barbara said, her breath breaking. "To avenge my mother. I got close to him with bad intentions, and now it feels like I destroyed everything." "You were used, Barbara," Richard said calmly. "Not out of malice, but because your mother didn't know how to deal with her pain, and she taught you to carry a story that wasn't yours." Barbara lifted her eyes to him. They were red. "And still, you can look at me like this?" "I can," Richard said, "because I was also blind in a different way. I also believed in aversion. I thought that old pain had died. I never imagined it had left such a long trail. I don't know who I am anymore," Barbara said. "I spent years creating this image of you as a monster. Everything I did in the last few years was because of that, and now I don't even know if what I felt for him was fake. Maybe not everything was pretending." "I know it wasn't," Richard said softly. "I felt it. There was something real, even if it was mixed with all of this." Emma stood up, as if understanding that this moment now belonged to the two of them. "I'll leave you alone for a minute," she said, leaving the room and heading to the kitchen quietly. Barbara looked at Richard, her eyes full of shame. "I did everything wrong. I got involved with you to destroy you, but I also fell in love. I don't know when, I don't know how, and now none of this matters." "It does," Richard said. "It matters because you're here telling me this. It matters because you could have kept pretending, but you chose to listen. And I saw your pain. I saw your truth." She shook her head, trying to hold back the tears. "I can't forgive myself for what I did to you." "I can," he said, "and I forgive you. Not out of weakness, but because I know where all of this came from, because you were also deceived by someone you loved." She collapsed. The tears ran freely, her shoulders shaking. Richard didn't move closer. He let her cry. There was no rush. There were no quick answers. Hours later, back at the house, Barbara sat in silence. She sat on the couch where she had so many times pretended affection and cried more. She cried for her mother, for herself, for Richard, for everything she had built and destroyed at the same time. When she managed to speak, she looked for him. He was in the bedroom, sitting at the edge of the bed, eyes closed. "I wanted to ask for forgiveness," she said. "For everything. For using you. For lying. For hiding who I was. but mostly for ignoring who you were. Richard opened his eyes and nodded slightly. I forgive you, Barbara, but more than that, I hope you can forgive yourself too. I don't know if I can stay here, she said. Not now. I need to understand who I am, solve this, fix what I can. Then go, he said. I won't keep you, but I won't close the door either. And she left. In the days that followed, Barbara sought help. She began a difficult, slow process of rebuilding her identity beyond the pain she had inherited. She sought therapy. She wrote letters to herself, trying to understand what was a real feeling and what was part of the plan. She stopped running, and she started looking within. Richard continued his routine. The house returned to being silent, but now it was a different kind of silence. It was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of someone waiting, without expectations, but with an open heart. From time to time, he would look out at the porch where they used to drink coffee. He thought of her, but without resentment. Months passed. One afternoon, the phone rang. "Hi," Barbara said. Her voice was different, more firm, more calm. "Hi," Richard replied, with a smile that didn't hide. "Can I come by one of these days? No promises, just to talk." "Of course," he said. "The house is still the same, and so am I." She came by days later. She didn't bring flowers, nor apologies, nor justifications. She just brought herself, more honest, lighter. They sat at the kitchen table and talked like old friends who didn't need to rush. "I don't know what we are now," she said, "but I know I don't want to live lies anymore." "Neither do I," Richard said. "And maybe, just maybe, that's a good start." They started seeing each other slowly, without hurry, without labels. The friendship was born there, in the burnt ground where distrust had once been. It was more real, more silent, but true. The marriage never happened. The wound still existed, but it healed with time, care, and truth. It was no longer an idealized love story, but one of people who faced what was ugliest within themselves and survived. In the end, what started as a trap turned into a lesson. Hatred gave way to forgiveness, and despite the losses, what remained was a truth that could finally breathe. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.